Greetings from Singapore. A very warm welcome to the Smart and Sustainable Cities Global Strategy Panel Discussion. Is our world sustainable? We have witnessed devastating impact of climate change and the extensive damages done to the planet and people. Since early 2020, the global pandemic has shown us that the health of our planet, people, and economies is interconnected and interdependent. The annual Global Risk Survey findings released at the World Economic Forum in January this year reinforced the fact that climate risks are deemed the top risks to humanity, businesses, and investment. Even when the world almost came to a halt last year in all, manufacturing, traveling, and the many economic activities, the global carbon emissions only came down by around 7%. In fact, since the Paris Agreement till the end of 2019, global carbon emissions have not decreased. Cities account for 70% of global greenhouse gas emissions, with building and construction responsible for about 40%. That means cities and real estate can make a difference to the global carbon footprint if we can design, build, and manage with low carbon and sustainability in mind. The race to net zero has been gaining traction, with more countries, cities, businesses, and investors making the pledge. Together, they represent 50% of global GDP and 25% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And in fact, many industry players believe that the technology and innovations are already there and could even help cities to cut emissions by almost 90% by 2050. In partnership with World City Summit 2021, CDL is very pleased to present this panel with experts in smart city, green buildings, architecture, energy and carbon research sectors to deep dive into the future of smart and sustainable cities. It is my great pleasure to introduce our four panelists who will each give us, an introduction of their expert area first and how we can actually work together to shape the built environment. After the brief introduction, we will deep dive into a Q&A session for another 25 minutes. So without further ado, these are our four speakers. And the first one is Christina Gamble, who is the CEO of World Green Building Council. Our second speakers will be Hannah Peck, the lead of APAC Cities and Regions CDP. The third speaker will be Koen van Ostrom, the founder and CEO of Edge. And last but not the least is Chia Chong Ha, the co-founder and CTO of Reimagining City LLC. So let's start with Christina first. And with around 70 green building councils, locally, regionally, and also globally, and 36,000 members around the world, the council aims to impact across three strategic areas, that is climate action, health and well-being, as well as resources and circularity. Let's start the ball rolling. Christina, over to you now.
Thank you very much, Esther. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak at this World City Summit 2021. The World Green Building Council is a global network, an action network that is catalyzing the uptake of sustainable buildings for everyone, everywhere. Along with our 70 green building councils, we're transforming the built environment around three impact areas: climate action, health and well-being, and resources and circularity. I'm really excited to be sharing with you all today the progress and solutions we're seeing globally to achieve net zero sustainable cities. 2021 is a crucial year for our sector. It is the year of COP26, and the UN promises that this will be the most significant summit since the Paris conference 5 years ago at COP21. And it is about time. We know that the built environment is responsible for almost 40% of global energy-related carbon emissions. And by 2060, the world's building stock will double, significantly increasing the impact of our sector. I cannot stress this enough. For people, our planet, and economies, inaction is simply not an option. but there is a way businesses and governments can take action today. Since January, the World Green Building Council has been collaborating with the UN high-level climate champions and a coalition of NGOs to set the agenda of the official cities, regions, and built environment day at COP26. This is a massive opportunity for our sector to demonstrate that it can be and can have a central contribution to achieving the Paris Agreement goals. It is also an opportunity to show we are prepared to tackle the emissions that we are responsible for. Together, we are encouraging businesses and governments around the world to join the Race to Zero. The Race to Zero is a UN campaign to accelerate climate action around all the world and making governments and businesses commit to ambitious mitigation targets. And winning the Race to Zero means prioritizing zero carbon buildings, infrastructure, and cities. Of course, we cannot win the Race to Zero if we also don't win the Race to Resilience as well. The Race to Resilience is a sister campaign to the Race to Zero, and it was launched at the beginning of 2021. Race to Resilience is setting out the ambition of catalyzing step change in this global ambition towards everyone having the tools to be resilient in the built environment. So that means putting people and nature first in pursuit of a resilient world where we don't just survive shocks and stresses, but significantly we thrive in spite of them. So it is a reality that many developing countries around the world, net zero is not a policy priority right now. Resiliency is. So we must all work to strengthen this ambition of building resilience and adaptation. Because of course, as we grow and make more awareness around the topic in many geographies around the world, we will see that eventually mitigation is a central part of the resiliency solution. So we are working to meet the Paris Agreement goals collectively without leaving anyone behind. So through our global climate action program called Advancing Net Zero, we are releasing soon an update to our net zero carbon buildings commitment. The updated commitment now contains new guidance and requirements for addressing embodied emissions. And this means that between 2020 and 2050, it is estimated that those embodied emissions will grow and grow if we don't take action. Let's say, if as we tackle operational carbon in buildings, if we are not addressing the embodied emissions will grow in proportion. So we have to act on a whole life cycle carbon vision now. So this update is again, raising the ambition for our sector globally, because to unlock total decarbonization of the buildings and construction sector, which is actually what the climate science is demanding from us and what the UN Global Goals for Sustainable Development also stand for, we need radical cross-sector collaboration, and in particular in Asia Pacific, to speed up the adoption of best practice. I am confident that by working together and demanding greater ambition from businesses and governments, we will accelerate sustainable buildings and smart and sustainable cities for everyone, everywhere. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Christina. Now our second speaker is Hannah. And just let me introduce CDP, which was actually established in year 2000. It is an international NGO which focuses on cities, regions, investors, and even companies to take urgent actions to build a truly sustainable economy by measuring and understanding their environmental impact. Over to you now, Hannah.
Great, thank you so much, Esther, and thank you so much for inviting me to join this very expert group of panelists. I'm really honored to be here. So actually, over the next few slides, I will be highlighting some key findings from the wealth of data reported by city governments through CDP over the past 10 years. Just last month, we released a significant piece of analysis marking a decade of cities transparently disclosing on climate and environmental data, but also looking ahead to the next decade. And we see that there's been a significant progress on local authorities taking climate action, such as being aware of the sources of their greenhouse gas emissions within their cities, setting targets to then reduce these emissions, and developing appropriate action plans. We also see that renewables account for over 40% of the energy mix reported by these cities, which is a lot higher from what you can see here than the global average. So we're definitely moving in the right direction. Despite this progress, we're seeing that there's still an enormous amount of work to do to adhere to the latest science, such as taking the very first step of setting an emissions reduction target that adheres with a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. The building sector is most often reported as the highest source of emissions for most cities. So it also makes sense that we're seeing it as the area where local authorities are taking the most action, as we can see here on the right-hand side, that states 50%. Leading cities on CDP Cities A-list show some great examples of the types of actions being taken in this sector. So I've just listed a couple here, and they are both from North America, but just to say there's a wide range of examples that come from all over the world across all regions. So an example here, which is a particularly ambitious one, is LA's Green New Deal, which targets the targets include having all new buildings be net zero carbon by 2030 and 100% of all the buildings be net zero carbon by 2050. And as we know that many of these actions can only be implemented in collaboration with a range of stakeholders. An example of this is Calgary Sustainable Buildings Partnership Program, which was actually established back in 2010. So they've been working at this for a number of years now. They also have a mix of policies and measures that address new and existing buildings, including energy benchmarking and performance metrics, which is crucial to taking progress of any actions being taken. So ultimately, what CDP is trying to do here is to showcase the best practices that cities are taking. We do this as well for the private sector, including companies that work in real estate and relevant sectors, as well as investors, and making sure that they're kind of putting their money where their mouth is, and ensuring that the world is working towards moving towards a sustainable economy. So I hope some of these key data highlights have kind of shown the progress that cities have been taking in particular, and the ambition that they're showing, which is pushing momentum ahead for the global stage. So thanks very much.
Wow, okay, thank you, Hannah. So the next speaker is Koen van Oostrom, the founder and CEO of Edge. Founded in 1997, Edge has become a global leader in tech-enabled, sustainable and healthy building development. Koen aims to radicalize sustainability through powerful innovations and seeks to effect further change in infrastructure and urban development while drawing inspirations from global leaders as well. So over to you now, Koen.
Thank you, Esther, and I'm very happy to be here today. There's a lot of work to be done. I think it's super important that we have so many policymakers that are trying to make a framework that can help us to move in the right direction. I'm a little bit on the far end of that with actually making the buildings, and what we are seeing is that things are not always fast enough to my liking. My company became somewhat famous, I could say, for making one building called the Edge, and we then changed our name of our company also from OVG into Edge. And the Edge was a building that was very sustainable and therefore relevant, but maybe more importantly, it was the first connected building, the first time that we really started to use massively digital technology, sensoring, in order to really understand what the building was doing. And even this building, which was the highest BREEAM score in history for an office building, it turned out that there were a lot of things that could have been done a lot better if we would have designed it all over again. And so what you can see is that there's still so much work to be done. Recently, we have done a other transaction. We started to work together in a joint venture with ABN AMRO. ABN AMRO has a very old office building in Amsterdam, and they wanted to make that into a very new headquarters. And we have done a lot of work to try and shape that in the right direction. Now, one of the major issues that we came into is that the definition of what a sustainable building today is so very hard. As a company that is active in, let's say, 5 different countries currently, what we notice is that even within the European setting, the one country is only talking about circularity, the other one is really clear that it's all about energy use in the building. A third country, and then I'm talking, for example, about London, what we see there is that they say, well, the energy use in the building basically has been solved for new construction, so let's only talk about embodied carbon, and let's look at that. And one of the things that I want to emphasize is how important is this going to be to sort of count our way back from 1.5 degrees into what does that then mean for the amount of energy that a building can use. And let's simplify that. Let's make one barometer that can tell us how much energy use and how much embodied carbon can we allow in any construction. And then, of course, the big jump forward is what are we going to do with the existing stock. The picture we have in front of us is quite a large building. It's a 100,000 square meter redevelopment building. And basically, we're going to reduce energy by 75%, and we're going to make sure that the building going forward will be net zero. And actually, after a little bit of a beginning time, it will produce more energy than it needs itself. My next slide is a building in London. Like I just said, the focus in London quite different again than the focus that we saw in Amsterdam, and then different again than what we see, for example, in a city like Berlin. And here we want to go completely net zero in not only the operation, but also in all the embodied carbon needed to build the buildings. And I can already say that the dream that we have is that in the next years we can come with an announcement that all our developments, also all the new developments, are going to be completely net zero. That will cost a lot of money if we really want to price the carbon emissions from construction, and then we take the whole supply chain with us, all the cement, all the making of glass, all the other parts that go into a building. We want to calculate that. We will use the modern 6D bin technology to go there. We will price it internally, and we will then get our wallet out and pay for it. And that will force our engineers to be as sharp as possible and on the ball to really make sure that we reduce cost. And then I don't need just the construction cost, but also the carbon cost to the max extended. All this will only be possible if we can do that in an international framework. We are going to do it anyway, because we believe that we have to make that jump. But it's so very important that other companies in the world are going to sign up to a similar pledge. We are therefore very happy that COP26 is happening, and we look forward to work together with the World Economic Forum and with a lot of partners that are trying to tackle this, to make very simple metrics, to make very clear targets, what that then means on a city level, and then to implement as quickly as possible, because clock is ticking and we don't have a lot of time left. Thank you so much.
Wonderful, Koen. Yes, please continue dreaming and create wonderful projects. And the next speaker is Chia, who's actually the co-founder of Reimagining Cities LLC, with over 2 decades of experience in finance. Chia has focused his career since 2008 on smart, resilient cities and digital twins, as well as net zero carbon communities. And as the co-chair of URI Asia Pacific's Resilient Cities Product Council, he aims to help real estate owners, developers, and investors to design, build, and manage their assets with low carbon and resilience as top priorities. And over to you now, Chia.
Thank you very much, Esther. And I'm very privileged, very honored to be here with this esteemed panel of speakers. Koen, the things that you do is just remarkable, and is inspiring many, many others to do the same. The title of my presentation, Race to Zero, we talked about that, and it's about healthy, resilient, zero carbon recovery. But I do want to say, the title is Net Zero Carbon by 2050. Is it going to be a myth, or is it going to be a reality? Are we going to just talk about it, or are we going to really do it? So let's go to the next slide. The favorite number that I look at, if we're talking about the decarbonization of the built environment, well, let's focus on carbon. And the first thing that we need to look at is this favorite number of mine. It's the energy use intensity. So what is your kilowatt hours per square meter per annum, which of your total energy that you're using in your existing stock across your entire portfolio? Let's measure that in the buildings as well as in the new construction. When we go to the next slide, we'll see that we want to, take the first steps. Let's start to measure it. There are so many solutions out there as to how we can drive down energy in buildings, but let's start measuring it. And it's not an annual audit that you call someone to do an energy audit of your building once a year or once every few years. But in this digital age, we just slap on a gateway and we can be collecting the data on your total energy of how much energy you're using for air conditioning, lighting, etc., and collect that onto the digital layer. So what we're doing is showcasing on the next slide. We're trying to do this at this development. We've been advising them since 2018, Lakeview Village, and it's about 70 hectares of land. It's about 100 buildings, 8,000 apartments, some commercial area with innovation districts, a hotel, restaurant. So what we're trying to do here, it's now just a rendering. We're now doing district level energy modeling and simulation to see, can we build this to become carbon neutral by a certain date? Right now, initially, we're targeting 2040, but we're doing the math, we're measuring the metrics to see how realistic is that. Next. So, on new construction as a beginning, how do you do that in new construction? We've got existing stock, but today I'll just talk about new construction. And you just do what we usually do when we design buildings, passive design strategies. And here in this case, what we've done is Lakeview, we take a baseline, right? If you build it to existing codes, how much kilowatt hours are we using? 168. And the architects are saying that they can do under 100 kilowatt hours. So on the left-hand side, if you click a few more times, we're linking the fact that the 80 kilowatt hours, if you multiplied it by the GFA and the price of your energy, we'll be able to save $8 million a year. Not only savings, but we like to say that that's an increase in NOI or net operating income. So now we're trying to convert this kilowatt hours, which is a very engineering terminology, but we want to convert that over to a financial metric so that CEOs and CFOs are a little bit more tuned in as to how what the objectives are in driving down energy and thus driving down carbon. Let's go to the next slide. So we can just click on. So this is the beginning of a digital twin. The middle image is the 3D image. On the left-hand side is energy. How much energy are we using for heating, cooling, lighting, hot water, and stuff like that? We measure the kilowatt hours for increasing income. On the right-hand side, we start to measure the energy supply and categorize it according to, is it dirty fuel or clean fuel? And that's the way we can start to measure the carbon. And we would have annual targets as to how do we drive down carbon by converting some of the dirty fuel over to clean fuel. And if you put it all together on a digital twin, the real-time data collection, living lab, that's where you have beautiful insights as to how you manage this entire community of 25,000 people toward low carbon development. I think that's it. My final slide is next, which is just saying data, smart cities, net zero. Let's connect the data into knowledge and into wisdom. Thank you very much for allowing me to share.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chia. Okay, thank you very much for all four of your sharing. I pick up some of the key points here. Okay, time is ticking. Okay, and we need to accelerate action. Innovation, technologies, data. Seems like all these are in our maze of how we should manage the built environment. And so what will really the future look like in our real estate sector? And Koen, I read your report, your recent report that, on the framework for the future of real estate is really, really very inspiring. And maybe you can start, with this, address this question of like how each one of you, your organization or your role, your advocacy can play a part to really accelerate action, because there have been a lot of talk already. And I heard this from Chia many times, it's like too many of talk, but where is the action? So how can we accelerate action and see impact? Koen, you go first, and then maybe we can have Christina next. Yeah.
Thank you, Esther. I believe that the first thing that we needed to do, and that has been done, is developing the technology to do it, and to do it in a way that is also financially sustainable, because that's going to be important going forward. The second thing is then to actually use that technology and make some lighthouse projects. And all around the world, leading developers and owners of real estate have done this, have done redevelopments, have done new builds that have shown that this is all possible. And now the most difficult part is starting, and that is, how do we scale this? And I think there's only one solution, and there's a couple of smaller things, like what Chia said very well in making sure that there's one number that we can focus on, maybe two numbers, but it has to be simple. I love the topic of resilience. I love the topic of circularity. There's a lot of other topics that I love, but can we allow ourselves to be busy with too many different numbers all around us, or should we just get back to two numbers, embodied carbon and carbon in the operation of a building, and focus at that and only at that, so that every owner of a building is forced to say on the wall when you walk in, these are the numbers in my building, and this is how good or how bad I've done. What is the most important thing to make it real move? It won't be enough to just have that number on the wall. We need very firm carrot and stick approaches. And there's in the world a lot of examples. And I know that Christina, for example, is doing amazing work in making sure that what is done in a certain region can also be copied in other regions, and so that we don't have to invent the wheel every time. But the carrot and sticks are going to be important. Put a price on carbon. Maybe we have to define that in a little bit of a different way, because some people find that a political thing, but just make sure it's expensive to be dirty and it's cheaper to be non-dirty. Because the honest answer is that most owners and most developers of real estate, they are just driven more by pricing than they are by saving the world. And we just have to make it easy for these people.
Yeah, how to strike that balance between business and, the taking care of the world. And Christina, since Koen mentioned you, do you want to carry on? Yeah.
Yes, sure. I think we can accelerate action by continuing to improve the accessibility of the knowledge, solutions, technology, and financing mechanisms to ensure that everyone can build and operate net zero buildings, across the world. Because even other reports say the opportunity on net zero are hundreds of thousands of jobs that can be created around the world if existing and new buildings get to operational net zero, and of course reducing embodied emissions by materials and construction. So this pursuit, this transition to accelerate that action, we need to democratize this solutions, and of course that every building that is built today is built to the highest standards. So I totally agree. We need that ambition loop for regulation to be bolder and better to enable this transition. But also, I mentioned the net zero carbon buildings commitment from World GBC in the introduction, and that makes sense because the ambition loop is businesses going further faster, demonstrating commitments towards 2025, 2030, the Race to Zero campaign front runner, showing the vision of the possible to unlock, and also as Hannah was saying, for cities to take a leadership position and enable regulation much faster than national governments that can really drive this ambition loop forward and grow it. And as much as I love the simplification of the metrics, that's great, but there are many geographies that have other contending priorities. And so we need to enable also the people that are in charge of regulation to have things, how do they grapple with their priorities and also unlock that it doesn't become like an unbalanced no world where they have to create jobs, address poverty, and deliver net zero. We need to contribute and shorten the loops and get them to be in a better place and have much confidence to be on this path.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Christina. Hannah, how data and best practices can come into the equation, in our journey to net zero?
Yeah, thanks so much, Esther, for the question. I think CDP really operates on the premise that transparency and data is at the backbone of climate action in general, and this also applies to, the sectors, including buildings. And the way that CDP kind of plays a role in this is by enabling this process across cities, companies, investors on a large scale. We know from COP21, when the Paris Agreement came into place, that large-scale momentum works to increase ambition and accelerate action. So CDP, as a not-for-profit organization, will continue doing this, not just only through disclosure and transparency, but also by providing the platforms for our stakeholders to take the leading action that they need to, such as setting science-based targets, which we've recently also released for cities. There are science-based targets for companies, but now cities are able to do the same, and also aiming for 100% renewables. So we're really providing the platforms for these stakeholders to take that leading action on a large scale to really build that momentum.
Mm-hmm. Great. Okay, Chia, you have the stage now. And how can we accelerate action? You've been chasing it for 12 years now. How can we, bring it, to the next level?
It's a hard question indeed, but I kind of relate to what Kun said. Let's keep it simple. And if we're talking about decarbonization, let's talk about carbon, right? It's not saying healthy buildings or better buildings, resiliency. These things are not important. Those are very important. We like to just make it simple, focus on the carbon. I like to bring attention to the global trend of the Net Zero Asset Owners Alliance. And these are very large investors who are embracing carbon neutral by 2050. And what we're doing at the ULI Asia Pacific, working with some of those investors, as well as real estate leaders, is not just look at 2050, but in order to accelerate action, we have to look at what we're going to do this year. And what are we going to do to 2025? So looking at some of the shorter term goals, and the Asset Owners Alliance, they're coming up with reduction of somewhere between 16 to 29% reduction in carbon by 2025. So I think that's one way to accelerate it. Look at some shorter term goals. Thank you.
Okay. Well, we are talking about, decarbonization. This seems to be a buzzword of, everybody. So how do you see that digitalization and sustainability can work hand in hand as key drivers to accelerate greener built environment and really, help, businesses, governments, and, to work towards a low carbon future or a net zero future? And what will be, in your opinion, the drastic change that you expect to take place in the built environment and cities in the next 3 to 5 years? Kun, shall we have your, since you're the tech guy, give us some examples if you can.
I'm not sure I'm the tech guy. I still find tech unbelievable difficult. And you notice that the moment that technology really hits hardware, and then buildings are filled with thousands of different components of hardware, you see how difficult it is. I at the same time totally agree with what was said earlier about digital twins and the possibilities we have to design buildings in a different way using that technology. We have learned that when we just as a company making bricks and mortar started to put sensors in the building, not having a clue, to be really fair, what the data actually told us when it came out. But in no time we understood that we had a complete oversupply of energy in the building. We in no time understood that energy use in the weekends was completely the same as energy use during weekdays, and there was nobody in the building. And with hiring a couple of more techie people that we then needed, we quickly were seeing the possibilities of really adopting to the way a building should be used. We now have the possibility to connect it to other buildings in the city and work together, for example, in Amsterdam with the CTO of the city of Amsterdam, and trying to figure out, hey, what does it mean also for logistics, for people traveling, and all kinds of other data points that are relevant for a building. So there's so much more that we can do. It is still relatively difficult. We see big companies like, let's say, Allianz that want to digitalize all their buildings, struggling a little bit with, hey, what exactly do we need? How do we build it into old buildings? We want to do a retrofit, and we also want to digitalize. We also have tenants that have a new wish. To be clear, my company is doing mostly office buildings, so I'm talking from the office perspective. But there's so much to be done. We will see in the years to come that there will be new startups making things extremely simple and easy to use and connected to these bigger goals that we see in the world. And so we believe that there will be packages. It will be also subsidized partly by, for example, the Green Deal in Brussels. It will make it cheaper to implement all that. And then it will be for these big owners like Allianz very easy to calculate exactly the amount of carbon emissions that they have, and to make a clear strategy how to get into a low carbon future.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, the industry player, like us, we all know that actually, if you start from scratch to design it, probably it's less challenging than, decarbonizing some old buildings. And in fact, technology has also really helped us. In recent years, we have been using, virtual technology. Right from day one, we have to design and, decide on the orientation of the building. And in one of our most recent multi-story mixed development, the virtual technology help us to reduce heat gain by about 20%. So right up front, definitely use technology, use solution, definitely it will help. And in Singapore, we are, heating up twice as fast as other parts of the world. So thermal comfort is very, very important. But without innovation, without technologies and solutions, it's hard for us to move the needle. And in fact, one area that apart from technology is also greening, greenery can really help to cool the environment. So like large vertical green wall, it has actually helped us to reduce heat gain as well for us. And now, Chia, you always talk about solutions, measurement, you are very good with numbers and all that. Can you help share this, contribute to this question? What will you expect to take place in the next 3 to 5 years to accelerate decarbonization?
Well, we're talking about digitalization and sustainability.
Yeah.
And it's obvious that the data, as we get it, share that data, 3 to 5 years, I would see hundreds of thousands of buildings that would need to share that data on their performance, energy usage, carbon emissions, and it's live. So that introduces a sense of transparency and I think sustainability will be accelerated with transparency of the performance of the buildings. It's not, tweaking numbers here and there. It's live on the screen for everyone to access. And I think we, in Korea, there are millions of buildings that have their the central utility. They have data, 32,000 data points for every building every year as to how much electricity that they're using. So we're not that far off by putting that onto a digital twin of energy and greenhouse gas emissions. So I hope that will happen. We are active advocates of the digital twin for that purpose. Thank you.
Christina, yeah, you have, and the World Green Building Council have been pushing the net zero, advancing net zero for some years now. And we're really glad that we have finally made that bold pledge in February and, sign up the World GBC net zero building and to commit to achieve net zero by 2030 for buildings that is under our direct management and control. Under the 5 pillars of your advancing net zero, tracking is data is also very important. Advocacy, bringing the, the ecosystem on board is also very important. So you also look at, the scope 1, 2, and 3, especially embodied carbon, that actually World GBC has been actively, promoting, embodied carbon over the last, in COP25, we were together there. So how do you see the progress? And are the companies or the corporates that you talk to, are they open to this? And do you see drastic, adoption, because now suddenly the world is talking about sustainability everywhere. Yeah.
Yes, well, there is definitely momentum, right? And I think what we're aiming for going into COP26 and building on all the great work that Chia and Cohen and others around the world are doing is to get to a breakthrough moment of let's say, commitment and accelerating that disclosure and transparency of data that Hannah also spoke about in those commitments, because it's not only committing, it is ongoing information. So what we were discussing about the digitalization and all of this, it is key because we cannot manage what we don't measure. That's the saying, no? But second, we cannot inspire others to improve if we're not sharing and being transparent about that information and that benchmarking. And so I see there's a lot of opportunity because companies are disclosing. The sustainable investment movement is also asking for that transparency, and the financial investments will also be more selective on the performance of buildings in terms of those metrics that we are refining, to demonstrate who are on this path towards let's say, real net zero. So there is that acceleration, and of course there's a long way to go, but the momentum compared to 1 year or 3 years back when we launched the campaign and the program has definitely changed. And even countries that didn't have mitigation in their priorities in the built environment are taking action. We have roadmaps happening, national roadmaps for decarbonization of the built environment in GBCs in at least 12 countries, a lot of them in Europe, the EU policy roadmap for decarbonization. There's a lot of things happening that we can build upon, and it goes through that transparency, disclosure, data, and that we can empower better solutions and policies.
Wonderful. Wow, now look like everything is talking about data, Hannah. So you can expect this question is for you here, that to share with us how CDP have 2 decades of experience collecting data, starting with carbon and expanded to forest and expanded to water, and now even supply chain. Apart from corporate, you're also talking about cities. So how would all these data, collections and management will really accelerate change towards net zero?
Thanks, Esther. Yeah, I mean, just for cities alone, when we started disclosure for cities back in 2011, we've seen a 17-fold increase in the number of disclosing cities. And for companies, now CDP is seeing more than 50% of global market cap. So over the years, we have absolutely used this growing momentum to advocate at these different kind of global convenings such as COP to show that not just national governments, but the private sector, local governments, subnational governments are moving towards this net zero direction, but they need those international or national frameworks in order to really kind of leapfrog and accelerate the action that they're taking. So while we're seeing such positive progress across the board from all these, what we call kind of non-state actors, what that's ultimately doing is showing that through the data, through this transparency, that there's real incentive for national governments and the international community to take firm action, not kind of create a world of uncertainty. And I think particularly that's where you'll start to see the money flow. It seems like data disclosure, it seems a bit dry, but really when you kind of look at the big picture, this enables the economy that we need to transform, to enable the world to move towards net zero. Because if there isn't any kind of economic benefit coming out of this, then it's not going to happen. So we need to show through the data that, there really is opportunity out of this. There's, money that can be made, and it can also benefit, of course, the world that we live in, as well as the people that live in it.
Well, you are touching on a very interesting topic about money. Okay, we from a private sector's perspective, we do need to look at creating value for our investors and stakeholders. If a company cannot stay afloat, you can't talk about saving the world. So how do we make sustainability and green building and a net zero a stronger business case? Just now you talk about investors, so maybe you can share with us that have investors are really stepping up to ask for data, and we just read news about some action against some oil and gas sector now, and then largest investors are also saying that they will screen out companies who do not have a strong climate strategy. So maybe free for all of you to chime in here that how to make green building and advancing net zero a stronger business case. Maybe Chia first, you are a finance man for 20 years. Talk to us how we can make green building a stronger financial and business case. Thank you.
Money is a central part of the discussion. Maybe it doesn't get put on the table, but everyone needs to keep the businesses profitable so that they can hire people and help the economy grow. I like the notion of, if you look at just Asia Pacific, and you look at the UN data saying that there's going to be, 70, 80, 90 billion square meters that will be built in the next 10 to 15 years. That they say that that's building all of London every month. So the rate of construction that's going on is just phenomenal. And over half of that is in Asia. The current building codes, we're building very unhealthy, very energy inefficient buildings. And that's in accordance with the codes. So unless we get a business case where we show, like through what Kun said, through lighthouse projects, and to demonstrate that they can get it near net zero. All right. If you go all the way to net zero from the get-go, I think it'll be too expensive and investment returns will go down. But in terms of my favorite number, kilowatt hours per square meter, can you design that building below 100 kilowatt hours per square meter? So it's more net zero ready. And then let the utilities bring in some clean energy, or other investors expand solar farms and wind farms to supply clean energy to the overall energy mix. So it's not like that the developer has to solve everything to get to net zero. But I think near net zero is a good target, and define that in terms of the kilowatt hours, and make sure that the investment returns. I always say, how can we get greener and smarter without over-investing? And that's the learning that needs to go on fast, I think.
Kun, in your interaction with a lot of businesses as a building owner, I think you have encountered a lot. What is the ROI? How soon can I, what is the payback for this big investment for your proposal? How would you, convince building owner, whether it is new build or retrofitting, how would you make it, a very strong business case?
I think for new builds, it's actually fairly straightforward, that it doesn't make any sense to make buildings that are not very close or completely net zero. The only thing you have to do is take into account the operation phase of that building. And of course, we have this split incentive problem that solves in many ways. The developer of a building very often has nothing to do with then the energy use and the energy consumption later on in the building life cycle. And so we have to find ways to make sure that gets taken into account. It would help. I was talking about a carrot and stick approach for the existing stock. If it hurts a little bit, if you have a building that is using too much energy. The Netherlands have done some work there. As of next year, you're not allowed to lease out a office building if it doesn't have an energy label C. So A, B, C is good, D, E, F, etc. are bad. Interesting to see today that especially the government itself has huge difficulties in getting their own buildings up to that level. And as we all know, sometimes the bureaucracies are just a little bit slower in reacting to what is happening. So I think that the ROI would be good. I also see that we work, for example, with a company like Allianz, and they are really seriously making sure that they understand what the energy consumption is of all these buildings, putting it in one model, digitalizing that, and moving forward. But to be really fair, yesterday I was on the phone with a big private equity player, real estate private equity player. They want to invest billions in Europe. And we asked them about their ESG agenda, and they had a story about the social components of what they were doing, but there was zero interest in the carbon topic. And they said, listen, it's not a law. We will always abide by the law, and now this is not part of it yet. Now, interestingly, yesterday, Shell got basically, a tap on the fingers. The law might be correct, but it's a human right now that we have a low carbon environment, and you are a big part of that. To be really honest, I don't find that the ideal way, because every judge can have a different interpretation. But I think that this is a big wake-up call for governments to say, hey, make sure that legislation also for companies is in place. I would say don't make it new taxation. Make sure that you indeed tax pollution, but that you keep the money in the system and that you use carrot and stick. Also provide that carrot opportunity for those developers and owners to then use that money that is coming from those dirty taxes into new innovations, big transparency around it to make sure that everybody knows what everybody's doing, but make sure that money stays in the circle, in the loop of real estate, because otherwise it will be difficult to, on the long term, get enough support for those kinds of actions.
Wonderful. Well, you talked, now let's talk about people, because we are building for people. We are not just talking about infrastructure, carbon performance, sustainable building materials. And last year, since COVID, a lot of attention and now actually going back to the users of building and the community, the social aspect of ES and G. So the built environment actually has a very strong impact on lifestyle and well-being of people. And now people are getting quite used to like working from home or even working from anywhere. So there are actually two schools of thoughts. Some people say that, it is not possible to go back to, to the old normal. Then some people also say that, no, we people like to see other people. We are social animal. We can't wait to go back, to the old normal, that we can go to work every day and we can go out, dining and all that. What is your view about the future work and living spaces that are, people-friendly and also sustainable? Yeah. Maybe Christina, you are talking about, better places for people, for green building and all that, maybe you share some insights on this subject?
Yes, thank you very much. But I would like to touch upon a business case just quickly. It's life cycle costing too. Companies doing life cycle costing to address the split incentive. It's a key one, and that comes also through regulation, improved procurement, and some progressive regulation also that we can address that. And that goes into the lifestyle too, because I guess going into the future, one of the most drastic changes, it seems that we will be working more from home. And that brings us to an opportunity to address the quality of infrastructure of homes, right? People are more aware there. And as I said at some point in our conversation today, that we need to provide better information to all stakeholders. Homes in volume is going to be one of the most, let's say in those new builds, is the biggest asset, right? So we have a great opportunity in this change of awareness to actually deliver home the message of healthier homes are homes that are very high energy efficient, less polluting, and of course contribute to improving overall quality of life. And so it would be I think there's an opportunity to address a wider audience, like by understanding that we have to stop bad buildings, that buildings that address net zero and air quality address our priorities. And I guess also bringing in that component of maybe cities that are as generous as nature probably is. Cities that get more green space, cities that are more generous with their citizens. It's another lifestyle change that I see, or a demand that I see happening, and people connecting more to places that overall bring that sense of community to unlock those sorts of behaviors and opportunities that make more sense and are more empathic, no, to every human being trying to have a better quality of urban life.
Koen, would you please share, your observation in your part of the world in Europe, that, post-COVID, what will you see the change, in the use of space and all that will become more sustainable?
So we see a huge war for talent in the office environment, and what we believe is that the office will come back stronger than ever. Maybe smaller, maybe for a lot of people it would be better to work in a hybrid way, 1 or 2 days at home and for the rest in the office. The office then has to be attractive because people get a choice. Do I today want to go into the office, or am I going to work from home? And so it's going to be designed around an atrium with coffee machine. It's going to be guaranteed fresh air, good air quality. We will have sensors that don't only measure sustainability, but also health. And I think that the huge opportunity that we have as mankind is that we're gonna now upgrade our buildings. I know the offices, but a lot of people are working on the other topics as well. And not only are we going to solve sustainability, we are going to make better buildings. As Klaus Schwab would say, we're going to build back better. And there's a huge opportunity. I hope that the people that are writing the Green Deal in Europe and that are writing Joe Biden's plan to make a move, I hope Asia will move. China is I think doing a lot, but that there will be a smart interaction between government, civil servants, and the people building those buildings to say what exactly do we want to get done, how do we organize it, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity to get it right, especially for the people. There's one worry that we have, and that is that in the total ESG part, there's the S is sometimes a little bit smaller. Affordable housing, even affordable office buildings are going to be a huge topic. And so if we make it very technically, and I think Chia and I agree that let's make it simple, let's have one number for sustainability, we need it. But at the same time, if you're marginalized already, living in Berlin, you can't afford your house anymore and energy prices go up because somebody needs to invest in energy systems, then maybe you have to go out of your house. And that is something we can't afford ourselves, because we need the support of the broader public. And so one of the things that I find the most difficult to solve, because it's not an engineering problem, it's really a social engineering problem, if you may, that is that S of the social fabric and keeping everybody together in this process. And especially in European democracies, and we'll see the same in the US, this is going to be very tough because there's a lot of resistance against higher prices for energy in a residential environment.
Wonderful. Okay, we only have half a minute. I just want to have one last lightning closing. Just give me an answer of yes or no. By 2030, do you think the world can achieve the goals that we set? Christina?
Yes.
Great. Hannah?
Having emissions by 2030.
Yes. Hannah?
Yes, I'm very hopeful.
Thanks. Wonderful. Chia? A yes or no? Come on.
Frankly, I'm not. I'm optimistically hopeful.
Hopeful.
It is quite challenging because we got to change a lot of what we're doing.
Okay, Koen, yes or no?
Technically, yes. Politically, maybe.
Maybe. Okay. So this raw poll shows that it is more positive than negative. And I would really like to thank the panelists, for sharing your insight and really closing with a positive but cautious positive note. And thank you for the audience, the attention, and to everyone here. I think we have hope in this decade of urgent action. Everybody can play a part, whether it is political, business leaders, or individuals, or even NGO. The new driver will be the consumers, not just, in addition to regulators and investors. And I'm really very hopeful that we are on track to a global race to net zero. And with this, thank you for everyone, and well, enjoy the summit. Thank you.